you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. It is Thinking Thursday. And we have one book that we're reading today, and that is Failures of Forgiveness, What We Get Wrong and How to Do Better. We have been in this book pretty much all of season 14 and definitely all of this season, season 15. This is episode 29. We are going to be taking a station break on next week. Our season is 50 episodes. It used to be 100 episodes, but we have narrowed it down to 50 episodes a season. And so, as we hit our 30th episode mark on Friday, we're going to be taking a station break for next week. And then we will resume after that. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So, again, we will not be on next week. Go ahead, take your time, go back through season 15, catch up with us. There is a playlist that will say Daring Dialogue season 15, and we'll go ahead and put the rest of our episodes in that playlist. So if you want to catch up with us to see what we have been sharing this season, you can go ahead and do that on next week. All right. We are in the chapter canceling versus forgiving. Canceling versus forgiving. And we know there is a lot of conversation still happening around this this issue of cancel culture, um, holding people accountable, um, and trying to figure out who do we cancel, why do we cancel them, should we do a complete doing away with that person, is there redeeming qualities about that person, should that person be admitted or allowed back into whatever community that they have been sent out of, right? I know we've had several stories in the news around, very popular figures, such as Jonathan Majors, and what has happened in his life. Lizzo with the accusations that were brought against her and what happened in her life. And a lot of people are looking at um, what's happening with them now. They're sort of on these transparency tours, I like to call them, to where they're being interviewed. They're sort of sharing their side of their story, their personal growth, what they have been through. And some people see that as, yeah, okay, that's the redemption side. But also, people are looking to see if they have anything to say about what they have been accused of, or what was their process like to deal with their situations. Now, from my understanding, I don't think either one of them has really delved into and talked about what happened to them. I think it's been more in general terms. And because of that, people are sort of like, I don't know if I want to look at anything that these two are doing or producing or a part of, because, in some people's minds, they feel like, hey, you haven't really atoned, you haven't really come forward and said or admitted that, hey, there was some breakdown in things that I did. People are listening to hear if there's any apology. And a lot of people are like, They're talking about their story, but I don't really hear any apology in their message. All right. And so, again, when you're in the public eye and you sort of do something that is in the public sector and in the public eye, people do want to see what your response is. And because of that public eye, right, there is sort of a responsibility to your audience, to the people who follow you or the people who support you. There is a responsibility there. So, as we continue to go into this topic, I want you to think about in your life, what does cancel culture mean to you? How would you apply that concept to your life, to the people in your life? Do you see cancel or canceling as something permanent? Do you see it as something where you give that person an opportunity to um, rehabilitate, to reform, and then to acknowledge what has happened and sort of give them an opportunity to come back? Or do you see it as this person is no longer a part of my life? I don't intend for them to be a part of my life. There is no coming back from canceling. Think about that as we read today. And here we go. Some have compared canceling to boycotting, and there's no doubt it is akin to it. Rather than focus on businesses like traditional boycotting, canceling focuses on public figures who are a business unto themselves. When black citizens decided not to ride public buses in Montgomery, Alabama in 1956 or support businesses in Birmingham in 1963, that enforced segregation laws, they were opting out of giving money and support to those who were complicit in their oppression. However, they did not boycott in order to destroy the city's economic system or to put local businesses out of business. The purpose of the boycott was to improve societal conditions by pressuring businesses to change their racist practices. Canceling is similar. Rather than being a practice that is about destroying the livelihood or reputation of celebrities, those who cancel often aim to protect the vulnerable and to put fire under the feet of powerful people so that they can change their ways and so that oppressive systems in general can be dismantled. Citizens in Montgomery could have remained silent about their mistreatment, protested only in private, or discreetly stopped using public transportation. Instead, they articulated their discontent and decision in order to bring attention to the injustice and to challenge segregationists to transform. Likewise, people can cancel celebrities and refrain from posting their decision online. Many, in fact, do. But those who announce their cancellation do it in order to publicly take a stand against injustice and to challenge public figures to change their ways. In this way, they aim for repair. But in contrast to the boycotts of the civil rights movement, which required immense coordination and resources, people today can engage in canceling with the touch of a screen. Social Social media has provided access to the public sphere, a chance to have one's voice heard to many people who not long ago would have been excluded from the conversation. Public discourse until recently has predominantly been a discourse of the elite class to the exclusion of alternative voices. But with the rise of social media, millions of counterpublics can now engage in debate, demand accountability, make appeals to justice, and publicly sever their relationships with public figures. And of course, we see that happening all the time. Social media is a way for the marginalized, who are often the targets of either ableist or sexist behavior, to push back against the powerful. Good morning to those of you coming in. This is particularly important when other institutions fail to do their part. When traditional standards of accountability fail, counterpublics rise to the occasion via digital calls for accountability. These online communities allow individuals to express their agency through a refusal to give attention and support to people who express disrespect for them or for others. As much as canceling is about agency, justice, accountability, and refusal, it is also about disassociation and solidarity. I liken it to what the philosopher Thomas Hill refers to as dissociation from evil. Hill argues that one of the reasons we protest, even when it's likely that we might not be successful, is to dissociate ourselves from evil. And I'm going to have to agree with that. And we dissociate not to wash our hands clean from sin or to merely show that we do not share the same values as a racist or a sexist person or a misogynistic celebrity. Often it has less to do with us or the wrongdoer and more to do with the person who is suffering, victims of the behavior. Now, I said this yesterday on my platform. I said, um, as much as I see these conversations happening on podcasts with celebrities where people are bringing on the accused and allowing them to share their stories, we often don't see the other side of that. And so my thing is, because they have the celebrity status and you're giving them the platform to air out their side of being accused, why not also allow the victim to have their side? Why not allow the victim to tell their side of the story, which often gets left out? We never sometimes hear from the person that was actually harmed. So just consider that. Hill claims that the point of disassociation is not so much to gain benefits for oneself or to punish the corrupt, but to enable one to honor the person, groups, or causes that from a moral point of view most deserve it. One would disassociate from evil so that you could meaningfully associate with the good. Our attention has currency. It matters to what and to whom we give our attention. Canceling can allow us to take our currency away from people who engage in the abuse and marginalization of others and give it to more deserving people. In doing so, we show our solidarity with the victim in the struggle. I agree with that. The two cultures. As we argued in chapter 2, a person can have good reasons to withhold their forgiveness. The decision to withhold forgiveness, far from being a moral defect, is often praiseworthy and sometimes prudent. Given this, even if canceling involved a refusal to forgive, it would not necessarily be the horrible thing that some people make it out to be. But does canceling itself always involve a refusal to forgive? I doubt it. I can forgive an artist for their misogynistic or anti-Semitic comments and still refuse to buy their albums in the future. While I have moderated my anger towards them with the aim of my own relief, I can still choose to stop being a fan. This is akin to forgiving my coworkers' harsh behavior and yet still choosing to resign from a company. Those who participated in the boycotts during the civil rights movement were also inspired by their leader MLK to forgive. For King, boycotting and the ethic of forgiveness were compatible. He thought both were necessary in order to achieve justice. The same is true with cultural boycotts. Remember that according to the broad view, forgiveness has several aims. Reconciliation is one aim among others. Not every instance of forgiveness requires that we ride off into the sunset together. Even if there's nothing inherently wrong with canceling, a person could still think that there are better alternatives, such as mercy and forgiveness. Perhaps this is why Demi Lovato urges us to choose a mercy forgiveness culture over a cancel culture. But is this something we really want? To decide, we need to think carefully about the relationship between mercy, forgiveness, and canceling. Mercy involves treating someone less harshly than you have a right to. By asking for mercy, a wrongdoer asks the victim to treat them less severely than is warranted by their actions. What is the relationship between mercy and forgiveness? They aren't necessarily linked. I can forgive you, that is, let go of my anger, no longer hold contempt for you, shake hands, and extend mercy. But I can also forgive you without extending mercy. I can, for instance, forgive you even if I prefer that the law still gives you a sentence that fits your crime, or if I decide to divorce myself from you entirely. This does not make the forgiveness less authentic. It is also true that one can extend mercy but withhold forgiveness. Yes, I can extend mercy because I am tired, or I pity the offender, or I no longer want to deal with them. My merciful response doesn't require that I engage in any moral practice with a reparative aim towards them. Well, how about canceling and mercy? While Lovato implies that these are mutually exclusive options, I think that perhaps mercy and canceling can and do often coexist. Consider this. If mercy involves treating someone less harshly than we have a right to, then we should ask ourselves, what level of harsh treatment does a fan have a right to? Without this answer, we cannot confidently know what counts as a merciful or merciless action. Perhaps on a scale of 1 to 10, harshness demanding refunds would rank as a 7, while creating a blog where you provide hundreds of reasons the public should not support the artist ranks as a 9. In comparison, no longer supporting the artist's career would seem to rank much lower. Now, these specific rankings are a bit fanciful, as the idea that we could specify harshness on a scale. But the point is that mercy is still compatible with harsh behavior. It is merely behavior that is less harsh than fans have a right to. And if so, though canceling may be harsh, this doesn't mean that it is merciless. Judges, for example, sometimes give offenders lesser sentences than they have a right to give them. The offender is still required to serve probation, or say rather than go to jail. When judges do this, we describe it as an instance of mercy. It is a merciful act, not because punishment is absent, but because the judge has a right to give the offender a harsher punishment, but waives that right. This is all to say that mercy is not the absence of punishment, protest, consequences, or canceling. It manifests despite the presence of punitive actions. Even if all this sounds correct, you might still think that there is something beneficial in promoting a culture of mercy or forgiveness. No one wants a culture in which we easily discard people and withdraw support from others, right? Don't we want a more merciful culture instead? Well, that remains to be seen. I think this opposition we have created between cancel culture and mercy and forgiveness is on one level unwarranted. Because, as I've just argued, canceling, mercy, and forgiveness are not in conflict with one another. But I also think that we shouldn't promote any of these as a culture. When we turn canceling or any practice into a culture, we will always endorse it without question or criticism. The problem of culture is not just the rate at which we uncritically engage. The problem is also the power of the crowd within cultures. We can be led astray if we allow the size of the crowd or the mob mentality to influence us in irrational ways. And I think that is what people are sort of coming to now when they look back on movements like the Me Too movement, obviously cancel culture itself. Some people are reevaluating how quick people were to cast people aside, to become the judge, the jury, the executioner without that person having their day in court. But then after that person has their day in court and they're found not guilty of some of the things they were accused of, or their cases are thrown out, but their careers are already ruined, right? And so people are evaluating this mentality of just casting everybody to the side and casting everybody out and saying, hey, did we really actually examine what was going on, or did we get caught up in the fervor of just throwing everybody out because it was a movement? And I think she has a very good point here with that. The mere fact that a large mass of people has canceled a celebrity does not give us reasons to also cancel that celebrity or withhold forgiveness. We should individually consider reasons for ourselves. The noise of the crowd shouldn't be your determining factor. And I think this is true whether it is cancel culture or whether it is boycotting. Because I've had to do a couple of just sort of like write ups and teachings about boycotting culture, ways that you can boycott. I think we're seeing a lot of that with what happened, what was that, April 5th? And then again, it's supposed to go on April 19th, where people are going to get out and they're going to protest en masse. Well, make sure that if you're choosing to do that, make sure you are doing it and you're looking at it as a reason for yourself and not just letting a crowd move you along. Because as we said, for Black people right now, it is dangerous for us to go out and put our bodies on the line. And getting people to understand that boycotting is not just, or protesting is not just putting your body on the line, but it's also putting your mind into whatever you're doing. It's also how you're spending your money. So, as she said, don't let the noise of the crowd be your determining factor for what you do. Make sure that your reason aligns with your own individual life, if that makes sense. Whatever decision you come to, though, make sure you act in ways that do not obscure, excuse, ignore, or perpetuate wrongdoing. And I think that's a good sort of internal mirror to hold up. What am I doing? And am I acting in ways that is obscuring, excusing, ignoring, or perpetuating wrongdoing? In this way, the writer says, I'm against cancel culture, but for similar reasons, I am also against mercy and forgiveness culture. I also think that when we present canceling, mercy, and forgiveness as competing options, we tend to make several mistakes. First, those who present the cancel culture versus mercy forgiveness culture dilemma often paint an extremely negative picture of canceling. When people suggest that we choose one or the other, they envision cancel culture in terms of mob like piling on, virtue signaling, and people losing their livelihoods because of the reaction of a few zealous online fans. This is, however, a pejorative view. Perhaps there is a psychological tendency, exacerbated by the conditions of the internet, to abuse this otherwise justifiable practice. As I have argued, canceling is not in practice a vengeful, life destroying enterprise. It is supposed to be an accountability practice, and like any other practice, it can be abused and misused. Those who present the dilemma also tend to paint an overly optimistic picture of mercy and forgiveness culture. Do we really want a world in which we respond to every wrongdoing with just mercy and forgiveness? There are reasons to be dubious. The British moralist Joseph Butler cautioned that we would never pursue justice if we simply allow the attitude of pity, compassion, and mercy to be our primary responses to wrongdoing. To highlight this, he asks us to imagine a murder case. Let us suppose a person guilty of murder or any other action of cruelty, and that mankind had naturally no indignation against such wickedness and the authors of it, but that everybody was affected towards such a criminal in the same way as toward an innocent man. Compassion, amongst other things, would render the execution of justice painful and difficult, and would quite often prevent it. And I'm going to be honest with you. I believe that when it comes to our community, when it comes to the Black community, people expect compassion and mercy to be our primary response to wrongdoing. Yeah. And because of that, people feel like us pursuing justice is almost the wrong thing to do. Because when something happens to Black people, family, whatever, a microphone, as we talked about in some previous episodes, a microphone is often shoved in your face to say, what do you think about this? Do you forgive? Do you forgive? You haven't even gotten time to process the wrongdoing or to process what happened, but people are automatically expecting you to have this primary response or to move to this primary response of compassion and mercy. And as he said, if this is your primary response, you may never pursue justice. Think about that. Similarly, the philosopher Charles Griswold, in his important work on forgiveness, offers the following warning about forgiveness culture. When forgiveness becomes the public rallying cry, played out on daytime television soap operas, encouraged by civic and religious leaders, and praised far and wide for its power to heal, its slide into confusion and vulgarity is almost inevitable. It becomes identified with closure. It is sentimentalized and transformed into therapy, and the criteria for its practice is obscured. It melds into forgetfulness of the wrong and is granted to all easily once the expected public theatrics are performed. Griswold does not argue against forgiveness itself, but instead highlights the problems that are likely to arise if forgiveness simply became a culture. Forgiveness may be a good thing for many, but a culture of forgiveness much less so. In my view, the fostering of cultures, whether they be cancel, mercy, or forgiveness, is not a good idea. This doesn't mean that we should never cancel or never extend mercy and forgiveness. When we are engaged in the business of holding others accountable and taking a stand against evil, we must make sure that we ourselves are being moral. In order to do so, we should work hard to practice the virtues of canceling and not the vices. We can do this by extending humility, empathy, and tact. We can do it by being sincere and by being honest. And we cancel virtuously by being discerning and critical of the information that comes our way. Next up, after we come back from our break on next week, we'll be taking a break from our podcast. We'll be looking at the subject of canceling in private. I think that a lot more people do the canceling in private. I think a lot more people choose to quietly put some things away and some things aside. There was a conversation that was happening online about the Harry Potter series, the Harry Potter books and the Harry Potter movies, and people were asking which one is better. And again, good morning and hello to those of you who are coming in. So they were asking the question of which one is better, and had anybody seen both, or should they just go with the movies, or should they read the books first and then watch the movies? And I said, well, I actually have not seen any of the books. I mean, read any of the books, and I haven't seen any of the movies. Now, I am somewhat interested in fantasy, but fantasy is not my first genre to go to. Usually, if I'm going to do fiction, I like to read romance fiction, historical fiction. That's sort of my genre that I would go to if I was doing fiction. On the other side, nonfiction, as you see here on the broadcast, we read all kinds of books. And I said, because of what I know now about the author and her attitude about several things, um, I wouldn't be interested in her work because I feel like socially, what she's doing in the social sphere has really overshadowed what she was doing with her work, with her books, and with her movies. And so someone asked me, they said, well, what did she do? I haven't heard about anything she's done. And so I put up a site that they could go to actually sort of look at what's been documented about her social attitude and her attitude towards justice and her attitude towards inclusion, all of those things that are important to me. So my thing was, if those things don't align, it would be hard for me to then jump into your work if I came to get to know you by your social platforms, right? And I think that is sometimes the tension that people hold, that celebrities hold, that artists hold when you are in the public eye. Because you might create this really great thing or this really great art, but then as you're in the public eye and people are getting to know you, the you of who you are that created this thing, sometimes those things don't align. And that's okay for people to say, I think this person does well, they're good at what they do, but their choices outside of what they do don't align with who I am and what I stand for. And so I think that's where private canceling can come into play, because you can just make a personal decision not to support that person or not to support that product or that good that they're putting out. So we'll see what she has to say about that on next time. All right. Again, Friday will be our last podcast, and then we'll be taking a station break on next week. I do not see Pastor Ben. I'm going to see if I see him down in my comments. So let me see here. I do not see him this morning. So I am going to end here with the reading. Let me know what you think about cancel culture. Feel free to message me, to email me at thedaringdialogues@gmail.com. I do read the comments that come through. Those of you who have been watching for a while, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Those of you who are new here to the platform, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, and thank you for joining us for this reading and for this talk. Tell me what you think. Write in, tell me what you think about cancel culture. Do you think, as she said, that it shouldn't be a culture at all? That we should be careful about how we view canceling people? Do you think that we should combine mercy with our canceling culture? Do you think that we shouldn't completely discard people? And as she said, canceling was never really intended to destroy a person's life. It was supposed to be a mechanism by which people are held accountable. Do you feel that we have moved away from simply holding people accountable to wanting to destroy their life? Tell me what you think. Write in if you so choose and tell me. Give me your opinion. Again, the email address is thedaringdialogues, all one word, at gmail.com. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to go out and be light. If you are celebrating any of the things this week in the spiritual realm, if you are taking on a spiritual practice this coming weekend, if you are celebrating in some way your spiritual practice, I want to wish you a very peaceful, a very hope filled weekend. And I hope that what you are seeking, you will find it. I hope that you're filled with light and with joy. And I hope that as you celebrate, that you will be reminded, that you'll be reminded of who you are, that you'll be reminded of the reason why you engage in your spiritual practice in the first place. Again, remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light. Take care and be well.